Your soulmate just let go of their biggest fear. This changes everything. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this story may speak to a part of your heart that has been waiting for hope. Stay until the very end, because what you're about to hear is a fictional journey about fear, healing, and the courage to choose honesty. Sometimes the greatest changes don't begin with a dramatic event. They begin with one quiet decision made deep within the heart. There comes a moment when pretending everything is fine becomes more exhausting than facing the truth. In this story, that moment has finally arrived. For what feels like an eternity, one person carried a fear that quietly shaped every choice they made. They feared rejection more than loneliness. They feared vulnerability more than silence. They believed that if they kept their emotions hidden, they could protect themselves from disappointment. So they built invisible walls around their heart, convincing themselves that distance was safer than connection. They smiled when they were hurting, stayed silent when they wanted to speak, and walked away from conversations before their true feelings could be seen. Yet every attempt to escape those emotions only made them stronger. Every quiet night brought the same memories back. Every ordinary day carried reminders of someone who had changed them in ways they never expected. Listen carefully, because this is where everything begins to shift. One evening, after months of trying to ignore what was happening inside, they stopped running from their thoughts. For the first time, they admitted that fear had been making their decisions for far too long. They realized that protecting themselves from heartbreak had also prevented them from experiencing the joy of genuine connection. The walls they built to keep pain away had also kept hope outside. That realization didn't erase every doubt overnight, but it planted something new, a quiet determination to stop living behind fear and start living with honesty. Meanwhile, the other person in this story had been growing in ways that were not immediately visible. Every challenge had strengthened their character. Every disappointment had taught patience. Every unanswered question had encouraged reflection instead of bitterness. They learned that real love is never about chasing someone endlessly or losing yourself to earn affection. It grows through mutual respect, truthful communication, kindness, and the willingness to keep becoming better people. Without realizing it, they had become stronger, calmer, and more confident than they had ever been before. Don't skip now, because the next chapter changes the direction of the entire story. The person who had hidden their emotions for so long begins noticing that every attempt to move forward brings them back to the same lesson: fear can delay the truth, but it cannot erase it. They remember conversations that still make them smile, moments of quiet understanding, and simple acts of kindness that stayed with them long after everything else faded. Those memories are no longer painful reminders of the past. They become invitations to choose a different future. One built on sincerity instead of avoidance. As the days pass, something remarkable happens. Instead of asking, "What if I get hurt?" they begin asking, "What if living honestly is worth the risk?" That single question changes the way they see everything. They stop waiting for perfect certainty because they understand that meaningful relationships are built by imperfect people willing to communicate with openness and compassion. They discover that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is taking one truthful step forward even while fear is still whispering in the background. Stay until the end, because the greatest lesson is still ahead. The turning point in this story does not come from destiny forcing two lives together. It comes from the choice to let go of pride, release old fears, and embrace authenticity. Every meaningful connection is strengthened when people choose understanding over assumptions, forgiveness over resentment, and hope over despair. Sometimes the biggest fear is not that love will fail. Sometimes the biggest fear is discovering what might have happened if we had never been brave enough to tell the truth. And in this story, that fear is finally being left behind, opening the door to a brand new beginning. My beloved child, stay with this story because the journey has reached the moment where everything begins to move. The decision to let go of fear was only the beginning. What followed was something even more powerful. A heart that had spent so long hiding was finally ready to be honest. At first, the change was almost invisible. There were no dramatic announcements or instant answers. Instead, it appeared in quiet moments of reflection, in the willingness to admit old mistakes, and in the courage to imagine a future no longer controlled by yesterday's pain. Listen carefully, because this chapter reminds us that the greatest transformations often begin in silence before anyone else can see them. For the first time in a long while, they stopped fighting their own emotions. They no longer treated their memories as something to escape. Instead, they accepted them as part of the journey that had shaped who they were becoming. Every conversation they once replayed with regret now became a lesson. Every misunderstanding became an opportunity to grow wiser. They realized that holding on to pride had never brought peace. It had only delayed healing. As that truth settled into their heart, the weight they had carried for so long slowly began to lift. Meanwhile, your own path continued unfolding with quiet strength. The waiting had taught you resilience. The uncertainty had taught you patience. Every season that once felt lonely had prepared you to recognize the difference between temporary emotions and lasting character. You learned to value honesty more than empty promises, consistency more than grand gestures, and respect more than fleeting attention. Those lessons became the foundation of a stronger heart, one capable of giving kindness without losing itself in the process. Don't skip this part, because the story is approaching its most meaningful turning point. The person in this story begins to understand that genuine connection cannot grow where fear is allowed to make every decision. They choose to stop hiding behind excuses and start living with greater authenticity. Instead of asking what they might lose, they begin asking what kind of life they truly want to build. That single shift in perspective changes everything. Hope quietly replaces hesitation, and possibility begins replacing regret. As each new day arrives, they become more grateful for the lessons that once seemed unfair. They realize that every setback had shaped their character, every disappointment had strengthened their compassion, and every unanswered question had prepared them to communicate with greater honesty. Looking back, they no longer see only pain. They see growth. They see wisdom. They see the person they have become because they refused to stop learning, even when life became difficult. Listen carefully, my beloved child, because this is the heart of the story. Lasting relationships are not created by perfect timing or flawless circumstances. They are built by two people who are willing to tell the truth, to listen with patience, to forgive sincerely, and to keep growing together. Fear may delay that journey, but it does not have to define it. Every act of courage, no matter how small, opens the door to a future that is shaped by hope instead of hesitation. Stay until the next chapter, because the most important conversation of this story has not yet taken place. A choice is approaching that will require honesty, humility, and compassion. What happens next will not be determined by fear, but by the courage to speak openly and to embrace whatever comes with an authentic heart. Sometimes one sincere conversation has the power to change the direction of an entire life, and that moment is closer than ever before. My beloved child, don't leave now, because the story has reached the moment where every lesson from the past begins to reveal its purpose. There are times when life asks us to stop looking backward and finally gather the courage to move forward. The person in this story has spent so long wondering what might have been that they almost missed what could still become. One quiet morning, they looked in the mirror and realized they were no longer the same person who had once been ruled by fear. The heart that had hidden behind silence had grown stronger through every disappointment, every unanswered question, and every difficult season. Listen carefully, because this chapter is about discovering that the greatest victory is not changing someone else, it is allowing yourself to change. For the first time in a long while, they stopped searching for certainty before taking a step forward. They understood that waiting for every doubt to disappear would mean waiting forever. Instead, they chose honesty over perfection. They accepted that meaningful relationships are never built by flawless people. They are built by people who admit mistakes, learn from them, and continue showing kindness even after life has tested them. That realization lifted a burden they had carried for far too long. The fear of being misunderstood no longer felt stronger than the desire to live truthfully. Meanwhile, your own journey continued shaping you in quiet but remarkable ways. Every challenge became another reminder of your resilience. Every setback revealed a strength that had been hidden inside you all along. You learned that peace does not come from controlling every outcome. It comes from living with integrity, compassion, and self-respect. You stopped measuring your future by the disappointments of yesterday and began measuring it by the person you were becoming. That quiet confidence became a light that guided every decision, every relationship, and every new beginning. Stay until the end, because the emotional turning point is closer than ever. The person in this story realizes that the words they have been afraid to speak have never truly disappeared. They have simply been waiting for courage to become stronger than fear. Every memory that once caused regret now becomes motivation to choose differently. Every lesson from the past becomes wisdom for the future. They understand that honesty cannot promise a perfect ending, but it can provide something even more valuable, the freedom of knowing they chose truth instead of silence. As another day unfolds, both hearts continue growing in ways they never imagined possible. Instead of dwelling on what cannot be changed, they begin focusing on what can still be created. Respect replaces assumptions. Patience replaces frustration. Compassion replaces blame. They discover that lasting relationships are not sustained by dramatic moments alone, but by countless everyday decisions to listen, to understand, and to care even when life becomes complicated. Those quiet choices become the strongest foundation of all. Listen carefully, my beloved child, because this lesson reaches beyond the story itself. Fear may delay healing, but it does not have to define the future. Every sunrise brings another opportunity to choose kindness over bitterness, honesty over avoidance, and hope over regret. Those choices shape lives more than any single moment ever could. The next chapter is waiting just beyond the horizon, and it begins not with certainty, but with courage. Sometimes courage is all that is needed to open the door to a future brighter than anything the past could have imagined. My beloved child, don't skip this chapter, because the story is approaching a moment that neither heart expected. Sometimes the greatest changes happen after the longest seasons of silence. Days pass, weeks pass, and life appears unchanged, yet beneath the surface something extraordinary is taking place. The person in this story is no longer trying to outrun their emotions. Instead, they are beginning to understand them. Every lesson from the past is slowly fitting together like pieces of a puzzle they never knew they were building. The confusion that once filled their mind is giving way to clarity, and the fear that once controlled every decision is becoming quieter with every passing day. For so long they believed that strength meant hiding their feelings. They believed that if no one could see what was happening inside, then no one could hurt them. They became experts at changing the subject, pretending everything was fine, and convincing themselves that tomorrow would somehow erase yesterday. But time never erased the truth. It simply gave them more opportunities to recognize it. Every quiet evening reminded them that some conversations never truly end inside the heart. Every ordinary moment carried an unexpected memory that refused to disappear. Instead of feeling trapped by those memories, they finally began asking what those memories were trying to teach them. Listen carefully, because this realization changes the direction of the entire story. They discovered that every meaningful relationship leaves behind more than memories. It leaves behind growth. It teaches patience where there was once impatience. It teaches compassion where there was once judgment. It teaches gratitude for moments that once seemed ordinary. Looking back, they no longer focused only on what was lost. They began noticing everything they had gained. They had become more understanding, more resilient, and more willing to communicate honestly than ever before. The pain they once wished to forget had quietly become one of their greatest teachers. Meanwhile, your own path continued unfolding with remarkable purpose. Every obstacle strengthened your confidence. Every unanswered question encouraged you to trust yourself instead of depending on someone else's choices. You discovered that your peace could not be taken away by uncertainty unless you surrendered it yourself. That lesson changed everything. You stopped chasing validation and started building a life filled with purpose, kindness, and integrity. You learned to celebrate your progress even when no one else noticed it. Those quiet victories became the foundation of your confidence, and confidence rooted in character is something that no disappointment can destroy. Stay until the end, because the emotional turning point is closer than ever. The person in this story finally understands that fear has been asking the same question for years: what if everything goes wrong? But hope asks a different question: what if honesty opens the door to something beautiful? That single question begins reshaping every thought. Instead of imagining failure, they begin imagining healing. Instead of expecting rejection, they begin preparing for genuine conversation. They no longer seek perfect outcomes. They seek truthful ones. And that simple shift changes the way they approach every relationship in their life. As the days continue, they begin making different choices. They become quicker to apologize when they are wrong. They become more willing to listen before making assumptions. They stop allowing pride to interrupt meaningful conversations. They discover that humility does not weaken a person. It strengthens them. Every act of honesty removes another brick from the walls they spent years building around their heart. Every act of forgiveness creates more room for peace. Slowly but surely, the life they once believed was impossible begins feeling achievable. Not because circumstances magically changed, but because their perspective did. Listen carefully, my beloved child, because this chapter carries a lesson that reaches far beyond one relationship. Every person encounters moments when fear whispers that staying silent is safer than speaking honestly. Yet the most meaningful chapters of life often begin with one courageous decision to communicate openly, to admit mistakes, to forgive sincerely, and to move forward without allowing yesterday to control tomorrow. Those decisions are rarely easy, but they are the ones that shape character and create the strongest connections. The horizon ahead no longer feels uncertain. It feels full of possibility. The past has become a source of wisdom instead of regret. The future no longer feels like something to fear. It feels like an invitation to keep growing with patience, kindness, and authenticity. Whatever tomorrow brings, both hearts have been changed by the journey. They have learned that lasting love is not built through perfect moments but through consistent respect, compassion, and the courage to keep choosing honesty even when it feels difficult. And as the sun rises on another day, the story reminds us that every ending can become the beginning of something even more meaningful when people choose hope over fear and truth over silence. My beloved child, stay with this story because the next chapter begins with a silence that feels different from every silence before it. It is no longer the silence of fear. It is the silence that comes just before a heart decides to speak honestly. For so long, the person in this story believed that hiding their emotions would keep them safe. They thought that if they buried their feelings deeply enough, time would erase them. But time did not erase them. Instead, it revealed what truly mattered. Every passing day became another reminder that genuine emotions cannot be hidden forever. They may become quiet for a season, but they always find their way back to the surface. As they reflected on everything that had happened, they began seeing the past through different eyes. The moments they once viewed as failures became valuable lessons. The conversations they wished they could change became reminders of how much they had grown. Instead of blaming themselves for every mistake, they chose to learn from them. Instead of carrying regret like a heavy burden, they slowly replaced it with gratitude for the wisdom those experiences had given them. That change in perspective brought a peace they had not felt in a very long time. Meanwhile, your own journey continued shaping your heart in remarkable ways. Every challenge strengthened your resilience. Every unanswered question taught you patience. Every season of waiting encouraged you to build a life filled with purpose instead of depending on circumstances you could not control. Without realizing it, you had become someone who understood that the strongest relationships are built on trust, kindness, and honest communication rather than unrealistic expectations. Those quiet lessons became the foundation for every meaningful connection that would come afterward. Listen carefully, because this is where the story becomes even more meaningful. The person in this story finally understood that courage is not about never feeling afraid. Courage is choosing to act with integrity even when fear still whispers in the background. They stopped waiting for perfect confidence. They accepted that uncertainty is part of every important decision. What matters most is not having every answer. What matters is choosing honesty over avoidance and compassion over pride. As another sunrise arrived, they made a promise to themselves. They would no longer allow yesterday to define tomorrow. They would stop measuring every opportunity by past disappointments. They would become the kind of person who listened with patience, spoke with sincerity, and treated others with respect regardless of the outcome. That promise quietly transformed the direction of their life. Every small act of courage became another step toward the future they truly wanted to build. Stay until the end because the greatest lesson of this chapter is simple yet powerful. Life often changes not because the world around us suddenly becomes different, but because we become different. When fear loses its influence, hope has room to grow. When pride is replaced with humility, understanding becomes possible. When honesty takes the place of silence, relationships have the chance to become stronger than they ever were before. And sometimes, that quiet inner transformation becomes the beginning of the most meaningful chapter of all. My beloved child, remember this as the story continues. Every new day offers another opportunity to choose kindness over resentment, patience over frustration, and truth over fear. Those choices may seem small, but together they shape a future filled with greater peace, stronger character, and deeper connections. The story is not ending here. In many ways, it is only now beginning its most beautiful chapter. My beloved child, don't skip this chapter, because every step of the journey has been leading here. There comes a time when the questions that once filled the heart begin to grow quieter, not because every mystery has been solved, but because wisdom has replaced confusion. The person in this story no longer wakes up wondering whether they should keep hiding from their emotions. Instead, they wake up asking how they can live with greater honesty, kindness, and courage. That single change transforms everything. It is remarkable how one decision made deep within the heart can quietly reshape an entire future. The road ahead is still unknown, yet it no longer feels frightening. Every challenge from the past has become a reminder that difficult seasons do not last forever. Every disappointment has become evidence that people are capable of growing beyond who they once were. They no longer see their mistakes as proof that they failed. They see them as lessons that taught patience, humility, and compassion. Looking back, they realize that every painful chapter added another layer of strength to their character. Without those experiences, they would never have become the person they are today. Listen carefully, because this realization carries incredible power. They stop searching for perfect certainty before making important choices. They understand that life rarely offers guarantees. Instead, it offers opportunities. Opportunities to speak honestly, to forgive sincerely, to listen with empathy, and to love with wisdom rather than fear. Those opportunities are precious because they shape not only relationships but also the kind of person someone becomes. Character is built through everyday decisions, not extraordinary moments. Meanwhile, your own journey continues revealing quiet blessings that were once easy to overlook. You notice how much calmer your heart has become. You find yourself responding to challenges with patience instead of panic. You discover that genuine confidence is not loud or boastful. It is peaceful. It is the quiet assurance that no matter what tomorrow brings, you can meet it with integrity, resilience, and hope. That confidence allows you to care deeply without losing yourself. It allows you to extend kindness without expecting perfection from others. Stay until the end, because this chapter contains one of the most meaningful lessons of all. The person in this story begins to realize that lasting relationships are not sustained by grand gestures alone. They grow through countless small acts of respect, encouragement, forgiveness, and honest conversation. A sincere apology offered at the right moment. A patient ear willing to listen. A promise kept even when it is inconvenient. Those simple choices become the threads that weave trust into something strong enough to withstand life's inevitable storms. As another day draws to a close, they feel something they have not experienced in a very long time: peace. Not because every question has been answered, but because they have stopped allowing fear to control the answers they are willing to give. They understand that some chapters end not with dramatic conclusions, but with quiet confidence that tomorrow holds new possibilities. They choose to move forward carrying gratitude instead of regret, hope instead of bitterness, and courage instead of hesitation. My beloved child, as this story continues, remember that the greatest transformation is often invisible at first. It begins inside a heart that decides to become more patient, more compassionate, and more truthful than it was yesterday. Those changes may seem small, but they create ripples that reach far beyond a single moment. They shape friendships, families, and every meaningful connection that follows. And as the sun rises on another new day, the story reminds us that every ending is also an invitation to begin again. With greater wisdom, deeper kindness, and a heart that is finally free to embrace whatever beautiful possibilities the future may hold. My beloved child, if you have stayed with this story until this final moment, then you already know that its greatest message was never about certainty. It was about courage. It was about discovering that fear can only hold power for as long as we allow it to. Every season of waiting, every unanswered question, every tear, every quiet prayer, and every difficult lesson became part of a journey that transformed two ordinary people into wiser, kinder, and stronger versions of themselves. Looking back, they realized that nothing they experienced was wasted. Even the hardest chapters had prepared their hearts for something healthier, deeper, and more genuine than they could have imagined. The person in this story finally understood that love cannot grow where pride refuses to move. With a calm heart and a clear mind, they chose honesty over silence. They stopped hiding behind excuses and accepted responsibility for the moments they wished they could change. They spoke with humility instead of fear, with compassion instead of defensiveness, and with hope instead of regret. They discovered that the greatest freedom does not come from controlling every outcome. It comes from knowing they had finally been true to themselves. Whatever happened next, they would no longer wonder what might have been if only they had found the courage to speak. Meanwhile, your own journey had quietly prepared you for this moment. You had learned that your value never depended on another person's approval. You discovered peace in becoming the best version of yourself. Every challenge strengthened your character. Every disappointment deepened your compassion. Every season of waiting taught patience. Without realizing it, you had become someone capable of building relationships rooted in respect, trust, honesty, and kindness rather than fear or uncertainty. That inner growth became the greatest gift you could ever carry into the future. Listen carefully, because this is the lesson that changes everything. Real love is never about perfection. It is not about never making mistakes or never facing obstacles. It is about two imperfect people choosing to listen instead of assume, to forgive instead of resent, to communicate instead of remain silent, and to keep growing together through every season of life. Those quiet choices become stronger than any grand promise ever could. They create a foundation that lasts because it is built on character instead of illusion. As time moves forward, both lives continue with renewed hope. The past is no longer a place of pain but a source of wisdom. The future is no longer something to fear but something to build with intention. They learn to celebrate ordinary moments, knowing that the simplest conversations, shared laughter, patient understanding, and everyday acts of kindness are what truly create an extraordinary life together. They no longer chase perfection. They choose presence. They no longer allow fear to write the next chapter. They choose courage instead. My beloved child, as this story comes to its close, remember one truth above all else: every meaningful relationship begins with an honest heart. Whether life brings reconciliation, a new beginning, or an unexpected path forward, never stop becoming the person you are proud to be. Carry kindness into every conversation. Carry patience into every challenge. Carry hope into every tomorrow. The strongest hearts are not the ones that have never been broken. They are the ones that continue to love with wisdom, integrity, and compassion after they have healed. And so, the final page turns with peace instead of uncertainty. The sun rises on a new day, not because every question has been answered, but because both hearts have learned that hope is stronger than fear, honesty is stronger than silence, and growth is stronger than regret. The story ends with gratitude for every lesson, confidence for every tomorrow, and the quiet belief that the most beautiful chapters are written one sincere choice at a time. This may be the end of this story, but it is also the beginning of a brighter future, one built on truth, courage, and the unwavering decision to keep moving forward with an open heart.